Maureen Zanda had never worn such an expensive dress before. The silk was heavy on her shoulders, stitched with tiny crystals that caught the light when she moved. She touched the edge of the veil pinned into her hair, staring at her reflection like she was looking at a stranger. Today was supposed to be her sister Lillian's engagement day. It wasn't supposed to be her. Outside the dressing room, voices buzzed. Guests filled the grand ballroom of the Bassett family's hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waiters passed with silver trays of champagne. Everyone was here for the Zanda-Bassett alliance, a marriage of two powerful families. Everyone except Lillian. "She's gone," her father, Ronald Zanda, hissed into his phone. His face was red, his hands shaking as he spoke to someone Maureen couldn't see. "Disappeared. Ran off with that nobody artist. I swear I'll." Maureen gripped her hands in her lap. Her stomach churned. Her throat felt tight. Lillian was gone. And now? Maureen looked at her reflection one last time. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. She wasn't glamorous like Lillian. She wasn't the one people noticed. She wasn't the girl a man like Joshua Bassett, the young, ruthless CEO of Bassett Group, would ever glance at. But none of that mattered now. The door burst open. Her father stormed in, his suit rumpled, his mouth a hard, thin line. Behind him, her mother, Margaret, followed, her face pale and worried. "You'll marry him," Ronald said, his voice low and fierce. "Get up." Maureen swallowed. Her voice came out small. "Dad, it wasn't supposed to be me. He needs a Zanda bride. I'm not letting years of planning fall apart because your sister's a selfish brat." Maureen's hands shook in her lap. She looked at her mother, hoping, begging for a different answer. Margaret hesitated. Then, softly, she said, "It's the only way, Maureen. The only way to save the family. The only way to avoid scandal. The only way to protect her mother, who had spent a lifetime being bullied by Ronald Zanda." Maureen stood. Her knees felt weak. The door opened again. This time, it was Joshua Bassett himself. Maureen froze. He was taller than she remembered, broad shoulders in a crisp black suit, dark hair neatly combed back, sharp jawline set in stone. His gray eyes scanned the room, pausing on her. His expression didn't change. Joshua Bassett wasn't a man who wore emotions openly. Maureen tried to lift her chin, tried to stand tall, but every nerve in her body screamed that she didn't belong here. She wasn't supposed to marry a man like him. But Joshua only said, in a cool, measured voice, "Is she ready?" Ronald gave her a hard push forward. "She's ready." Maureen stepped forward, trying not to trip over the heavy hem of the dress. Her fingers twisted in the fabric. Joshua's eyes locked on hers. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something flicker there, something she didn't understand. But then he turned. And offered his arm. "Shall we?" Maureen hesitated only a second before slipping her hand onto his arm. His suit jacket was smooth under her fingertips, the muscle underneath tense. They walked together through the long hallway toward the ballroom doors. Each step felt heavier than the last. When they reached the doors, Joshua leaned down slightly, his voice low so only she could hear. "You can still say no." Maureen's head snapped up. She met his eyes. For the first time, she saw it, the gentleness he kept hidden beneath the cold mask. If she said no, he wouldn't stop her. He would take the blame, shield her from the fallout. But if she said no, her mother would suffer. Maureen's chest ached. She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to cry. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Joshua straightened. His face returned to that impassive mask. The doors opened. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs went off. Camera shutters clicked. Maureen kept her eyes forward, kept her grip tight on Joshua's arm. She barely heard the officiant's words. She barely heard herself say, "I do." Joshua's voice, low and steady, was the only thing that kept her grounded. "I do." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band, heavy with meaning. Applause exploded around them as they kissed, a polite brush of lips for the cameras. Maureen's heart thundered. Joshua's hand found the small of her back as they turned to face the crowd. He leaned down again, his breath warm against her ear. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll take care of everything." The Rolls-Royce glided smoothly through the streets of Lagos, its dark windows shielding them from the world outside. Maureen sat stiffly in the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the weight of the wedding ring a constant, strange pressure on her finger. Joshua Bassett sat beside her, silent. His suit was immaculate, his posture relaxed, but not casual. Controlled. Like a man used to holding the world in his hands. The city lights blurred past. Maureen glanced sideways at him, half expecting him to say something. Anything. But he didn't. His face was turned toward the window, sharp jawline illuminated faintly by the passing glow of the city. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was small, careful. "Where are we going?" Joshua turned his head, studied her for a moment with those unreadable gray eyes. "Home. Home." Maureen swallowed. Right. She was going home, but not to the modest flat she'd shared with her mother. She was going to his home. A new life she hadn't chosen. The car pulled up in front of a towering building in Victoria Island. The Bassett Residences, one of the most exclusive addresses in Lagos. The security gates swung open at their approach. As they drove inside, Maureen saw manicured gardens, a gleaming lobby of marble and gold, and staff waiting like statues in black uniforms. When the car stopped, a valet opened the door. Joshua stepped out first, turning to offer his hand. Maureen hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was steady. Firm. Warm. They rode the elevator in silence, the soft hum of the machine the only sound between them. When the doors opened on the top floor, Maureen gasped softly. The penthouse was vast, a wide open space flooded with soft light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the night sky and the twinkling city below. The floors gleamed, the furniture sleek and modern in muted tones of gray and cream. It was breathtaking. Cold, but breathtaking. Joshua led the way inside, then turned to face her. "This is your home now," he said. "If you need anything, just ask Maxwell. He's the house manager." Maureen nodded, her throat too tight for words. Joshua shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it neatly over the back of a chair. He loosened his tie, the first hint of ease he'd shown all night. "I'll have a room prepared for you." Maureen blinked. A room? He glanced at her, something almost amused in his eyes. "You'll have your own space." This marriage, he paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "It's a partnership. Nothing more is expected of you." A weight Maureen hadn't even realized she was carrying lifted from her shoulders. She managed a shaky breath. "Thank you." Joshua nodded once. Efficient. Final. He moved to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water. Maureen stayed frozen near the entrance, feeling completely out of place in the glittering, perfect world. After a moment, Joshua spoke again. "There's something else." Maureen looked up. He pulled a slim folder from the counter and held it out to her. A contract. She took it with numb fingers, flipping it open. The clauses were clear, written in crisp legal language. No interference in each other's personal affairs. Mutual respect in public appearances. Confidentiality about the marriage. Separation after 2 years, upon mutual agreement. It was cold. Businesslike. Just like their marriage. You can take your time to review it, Joshua said. If you have questions, Maxwell can arrange for a lawyer. Maureen closed the folder. I don't have questions. Joshua's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Good. He set his glass down, straightened. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Make yourself comfortable. Without another word, he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Maureen standing alone in the vast, silent space. Later, after Maxwell showed her to a guest room, her room, apparently, Maureen stood at the window, staring out at the city. So this was it. Married to a man she barely knew. Trapped in a golden cage. Bound by a contract. And yet. Maureen touched the ring on her finger. Simple platinum. No diamonds, no flash. She thought about the way Joshua had offered her an out at the altar. You can still say no. He hadn't pressured her. Hadn't forced her. In fact, he'd treated her with respect. It was more than she had expected. She turned away. From the window, exhausted. The bed was large, draped in soft linen. She sank into it, kicking off her heels. As she pulled the covers up to her chin, she told herself the same thing over and over. It's just for 2 years. You can survive this. But somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered a different truth. 2 years was a long time. And Joshua Bassett was not the cold, heartless man she had imagined. Not at all. The next morning, Maureen was awake before dawn. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at her bare feet against the smooth marble floor. The weight of everything still sat heavily on her shoulders, a new home, a new husband, a life she didn't choose. Her fingers brushed the ring on her hand. Real. It was all real. Maureen finally stood, moving quietly through the silent penthouse. The air was cool, smelling faintly of coffee and expensive cologne. Joshua's scent lingered in the halls. In the kitchen, Maxwell, the house manager, was already at work, arranging breakfast, fresh fruit, toast, steaming mugs of coffee. Good morning, madam, Maxwell said with a respectful nod. Maureen managed a small smile. Morning. She wasn't used to being called madam. She wasn't used to this life. She picked at a slice of toast, forcing herself to eat. Across the wide expanse of the penthouse, she could hear the faint hum of the elevator. A moment later, Joshua appeared, dressed immaculately in a navy suit, briefcase in hand. He paused when he saw her. Their eyes met. Joshua nodded once. Eat something. It was more of an instruction than a suggestion, but there was no harshness in it. Maureen nodded back. Without another word, Joshua headed out, the doors sliding closed behind him with a soft click. Later that day at Grace Financial. Maureen clutched her bag tightly as she made her way through the glass-walled offices of Grace Financial. Heads turned as she passed. She could feel the weight of the stairs, the whispering behind manicured hands. That's her, right? Yeah, the one who suddenly married the Bassett heir. They say it wasn't even her who was supposed to marry him. Her sister ran away. Maureen kept her chin up, her strides even. She was used to whispers. She had grown up under the sneers of people who thought a stepmother's daughter was always less. But still, it hurt. At her desk, she found a bouquet waiting. Not just any bouquet, a towering arrangement of white lilies and gold-tipped roses. Elegant. Understated. A simple card was tucked into the flowers. Congratulations. J.B. Maureen stared at it, her breath catching. No one in the office missed it. Whispers turned into murmurs, then silence. For the first time, the look she received shifted from disdain to wary curiosity. She tucked the card back into the bouquet and sat down. Later in the day, in the break room, Maureen found herself cornered. Ruby Zeno leaned casually against the counter, sipping coffee. She was flawless in a fitted blue dress, her gelly tied perfectly. Well, Ruby said, her smile sharp. Looks like we have royalty among us. Maureen kept her face neutral. I'm just here to work. Of course you are, Ruby said smoothly. But you know how it looks, don't you? Suddenly married into wealth. Must be nice, skipping the hard work. Maureen clenched her fists under the table. Before she could respond, another voice cut in. Some of us prefer to earn our way up. It was Sophia Bush. She stood nearby, arms crossed, gaze cool. Maureen opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Ruby laughed lightly. Earn. Please. She's sitting pretty, and we're the ones stuck doing the real work. Sophia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Maureen forced a small smile. If you'll excuse me, I have reports to finish. She stood and walked out, feeling the heat of their stares on her back. That evening. The sun was setting as Maureen returned to the penthouse. She didn't expect Joshua to be home yet, he was a man married to his work, after all. But to her surprise, when she entered, he was sitting on the balcony, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a glass of water on the table beside him. He was scrolling through his phone but looked up when he heard her. You're home early, Maureen said, unsure why she spoke at all. Joshua nodded. You don't have to cook, if you're wondering. Dinner's handled. She shook her head. I wasn't. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. His gaze was direct but not uncomfortable. How was work? Maureen hesitated. Should she lie? Fine, she said carefully. Joshua's brow lifted slightly. You don't have to lie to me. Maureen bit her lip. It's challenging. That's expected. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Joshua Bassett. Billionaire. CEO. Ice cold, they said. Ruthless. But here he was, offering small kindnesses she never expected. She cleared her throat. Thank you. For the flowers. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Maxwell arranged it. Maureen smiled, a real one this time. Still. Thank you. Joshua leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. They'll talk, he said, his voice low. They always do. But you don't have to listen. Maureen nodded. She turned to leave but paused. Joshua? He looked up. I'm not used to this life. I know, he said simply. Maureen swallowed the lump in her throat. But I'll try my best. He studied her for a long moment. I never doubted that. That night, lying in her bed, Maureen stared up at the ceiling. Maybe it wasn't a real marriage. Maybe it was just a contract. But Joshua Bassett, cold, untouchable Joshua, had quietly shielded her in ways no one ever had. And for the first time, Maureen wondered if she wasn't as alone as she thought. Grace Financial's office was unusually busy that morning. Papers shuffled. Phones rang. The sharp scent of freshly brewed coffee clung to the air. Maureen Zanda sat at her desk, sorting through a mountain of reports. She welcomed the distraction, anything to keep her mind away from the weight on her left hand, the platinum ring she kept twisting unconsciously. She was deep into a budget proposal when a familiar voice cut through the usual noise. Is that really you, Maureen? She froze. Slowly, she looked up. There he was, Zach Perry. Zach stood tall, broader now than he'd been in university, his once boyish face sharpened into maturity. His dark brown skin seemed to glow under the office lights, and his suit, casual but crisp, was tailored to fit his athletic frame perfectly. Maureen blinked, stunned. Zach, she breathed, barely above a whisper. He grinned, the same crooked grin she remembered, and crossed the distance to her desk. I thought I was seeing things, he said. Maureen Zanda, working here, of all places. Maureen found her voice. What are you doing here? Consulting, Zach said. I'm with the finance audit team now. Got reassigned from the States a few months ago. And you? I heard some news. Maureen felt the eyes of half the floor swivel toward them. She straightened in her seat. Congratulations on your reassignment. Zach chuckled softly. Still formal as ever. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Can we catch up later? Lunch? Maureen hesitated, her heart doing an awkward thud against her ribs. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A simple text. Dinner at 7. Don't be late. JB. Maureen put her phone down carefully. I don't think that's a good idea, she said quietly. Zach's grin faltered, just a fraction. He straightened up, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Sure. Maybe another time. He lingered for a second longer, eyes searching hers, then gave a small nod and walked away. Maureen let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Later that evening. Back at the penthouse, the tension hadn't left her chest. Maureen walked into the living room to find Joshua Bassett sitting at the dining table, sleeves rolled up, laptop open. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable as always. You're late, Joshua said mildly. Maureen bit the inside of her cheek. Something came up. Joshua said nothing for a moment, just closed his laptop and stood. He was wearing a simple white shirt, no tie, the top button undone. Casual, for him. Relaxed, but still commanding. Dinner's waiting, he said, motioning to the set table. Maureen sat down opposite him. Maxwell had outdone himself, grilled chicken, jollof rice, sautéed vegetables, fresh pineapple juice. They ate mostly in silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware. Finally, Joshua spoke. I heard there's a new consultant at Grace. Maureen's hand paused over her glass. Yes, she said carefully. Joshua leaned back in his chair. Old friend? Classmate, Maureen corrected. We haven't spoken in years. Joshua watched her for a long moment. His gaze was steady, unreadable. You don't owe me an explanation, he said finally. Maureen didn't know why, but that stung a little. I know, she murmured. Still, Joshua didn't look away. But if he gives you trouble, or if anyone does, you tell me. Maureen met his eyes, surprised by the steel in his voice. I can handle it, she said. Joshua's mouth twitched. I don't doubt that. The meal continued, and Maureen couldn't help but wonder, was it just protection he offered? Or was there something else behind those guarded gray eyes? A few days later. Maureen was heading to her car in the parking garage when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Zach. He smiled, a little awkwardly. Hey. Can we talk for a minute? Maureen glanced around. The garage was mostly empty. I'm not sure. Please, Zach said. Just 5 minutes. Maureen hesitated, then nodded. They stood by the elevators, a cool breeze from outside ruffling the papers in her hand. I didn't know you were married, Zach said. Maureen said nothing, just tightened her grip on her bag. Zach shifted. It's just. I was surprised. You always said you wanted to find love on your own terms. Maureen's chest tightened. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Zach looked at her, really looked. Are you happy? Maureen opened her mouth, and closed it again. Was she happy? She thought of Joshua, his quiet support, his unexpected kindness. She thought of the way he always made space for her, even in silence. I'm fine, she said finally. Zack gave a soft chuckle, more sad than amused. You deserve more than fine. Maureen didn't reply. The elevator dinged. I should go, she said. Zack nodded slowly. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. She stepped into the elevator, the doors closing between them. As she rode up to the penthouse, Maureen stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. Zack was right. She did deserve more than fine. But maybe, just maybe, she already had it. And maybe, she thought as she touched the cool band of her wedding ring, happiness wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was quiet. Steady. Like Joshua Bassett. Maureen stood stiffly in the grand living room of her childhood home. It had been months since she last set foot here, but nothing had changed, the cold marble floors, the heavy velvet drapes that blocked out the sunlight, the suffocating weight of expectation. And at the center of it all, seated like a king in his leather armchair, was her father. Ronald Zanda. He was older, grayer than she remembered, but no less intimidating. His eyes were sharp and calculating as they pinned her in place. Her mother, Margaret, hovered near the entrance to the dining room, her hands wringing the hem of her dress, silent and tense. Maureen's jaw tightened. She stood taller. Why are you here? Ronald asked, his voice low, dangerous. Maureen took a breath. I came to visit Mama. Margaret gave her a small, grateful smile. Ronald scoffed. Visit? Don't lie to me, girl. You think just because you married into money, you can parade in here, acting like you're better than us? Maureen's stomach twisted. I didn't come to fight. You married Bassett, Ronald sneered. You think you're untouchable now? Maureen said nothing. Ronald leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You listen to me. That marriage, that company, none of it makes you free. You owe this family. You owe me. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Ronald, she's quiet. Ronald barked. Maureen flinched. Old habits died hard. You think you can waltz in and ignore your responsibilities? Ronald hissed. I built this family. I gave you everything. You'll pay me back. Maureen lifted her chin. I married Joshua to protect Mama. Not to pay you. Ronald's face turned an ugly shade of red. Don't forget who raised you. You didn't raise me, Maureen said, her voice surprisingly steady. You controlled me. Silence. Heavy, crackling. Maureen turned to her mother. Mama, you can come stay with me. You don't have to live like this anymore. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. Fear rooted her to the spot. Ronald stood. You're not taking her anywhere. Maureen met his glare without flinching. You can't stop me, she said softly. Not anymore. Ronald's hand twitched at his side, but he didn't move closer. He was losing control, and he knew it. Maureen reached into her bag, pulled out a slim white envelope, and tossed it onto the coffee table. What's this? Ronald demanded. A formal notice, Maureen said. Effective immediately, all financial support from Bassett Group to you, the fake loans, the fake contracts, it's over. Ronald's face darkened. You little. The house, the cars. All of it tied to Joshua's goodwill. Not yours. Maureen stepped closer, her voice low but cutting. You have no power over me anymore. And soon, you'll have no power over Mama either. Ronald looked at Margaret, who for once, didn't shrink back. Maureen held out her hand. Come with me, Mama. Margaret hesitated, torn between fear and hope. Finally, slowly, she moved. Ronald's shout followed them as Maureen led her mother to the door. If you leave now, you're dead to me. Margaret didn't even look back. Later that night. Maureen sat on the penthouse balcony, her mother beside her, wrapped in a soft blanket, sipping tea. The city stretched out before them, glittering and endless. "I can't believe I'm here," Margaret whispered. Maureen smiled faintly. "You're free now." Margaret turned to look at her daughter, pride shining in her eyes. "You saved me," she said. Maureen shook her head. "We saved each other." A soft knock came from behind them. Joshua stepped onto the balcony, his sleeves rolled up, his tie gone, a rare moment of ease in his stiff world. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. Maureen nodded. "Better than all right." Joshua's gaze flickered to Margaret, then back to Maureen. "If you need anything," he said, voice low, "just say the word." Maureen's heart warmed. She didn't need to say anything. Joshua already understood. Sometimes, love didn't come with grand declarations. Sometimes, it came with quiet support, offered freely and without expectation. And Maureen knew, sitting there under the endless Lagos sky, that she wasn't alone anymore. She never would be again. The days that followed were oddly calm. Maureen found a quiet rhythm: work, dinner, long talks with her mother on the penthouse balcony. Joshua remained the same, steady, distant but polite, his presence like a constant background hum. He didn't press, didn't intrude. He let her and Margaret settle into the space as if it had always been theirs. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Joshua lingered in the living room, reviewing reports on his tablet. Maureen hesitated in the hallway, watching him. There was something comforting about him, she realized. Not in the grand, sweeping ways she once imagined love would be, the fireworks, the dizzying highs. No, Joshua's presence was like the steady beat of rain against a window. Quiet. Constant. Safe. Maureen crossed the room slowly, her bare feet soundless on the cool marble. She sat down on the far end of the sofa, curling her legs under her. Joshua glanced at her but said nothing. She swallowed, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. She tucked a braid behind her ear. "I wanted to say thank you." Joshua set his tablet down. His gaze was direct. Steady. "You don't need to thank me." "I do," Maureen said, her voice soft. "For giving Mama a place. For everything." Joshua studied her for a long moment. "It's the least I could do." She fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. "Still. It means a lot." Joshua's mouth lifted, a fraction, almost a smile. "You've changed." Maureen blinked. "Changed?" "You're stronger now," he said simply. Maureen looked down, feeling warmth crawl up her neck. "Maybe I'm just tired of being afraid," she murmured. Joshua said nothing, but there was something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite name. Maureen cleared her throat. "I should let you get back to work." She stood, but as she turned to leave, she tripped, a slight misstep, her toes catching on the edge of the rug. Joshua was on his feet in an instant, catching her by the arms before she could fall. Maureen gasped, her hands landing against his chest. The world seemed to freeze. She was painfully aware of how close they were, Joshua's hands steady on her arms, his breath brushing her forehead, his heartbeat a slow, steady drum under her palms. Their eyes locked. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, Joshua's hand slid from her arm to her jaw, his fingers gentle against her skin. Maureen's breath hitched. Joshua hesitated, searching her face. And then, he kissed her. It wasn't slow, careful, like he was giving her the chance to pull away. But Maureen didn't pull away. First time, Maureen felt something inside her crack open, a space she hadn't realized was empty, filling slowly, warmly. When Joshua finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to." Maureen shook her head quickly. "Don't apologize." They stood there for a heartbeat longer, caught between past scars and future possibilities. Joshua pulled back fully, his hands slipping away from her. "I should," he started. Maureen smiled softly. "Me too." They stepped apart awkwardly, both pretending not to notice the way their hands lingered, reluctant to let go. Later that night, Maureen lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers brushing her lips. The kiss hadn't been fireworks. It hadn't been a wild explosion. It had been something better. It had been a promise. She smiled into the darkness, her heart light. Maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't loud. Maybe it whispered. And maybe, Joshua Bassett wasn't just her husband in name anymore. Maybe he was becoming something much more dangerous. Something she never thought she'd have. Someone she could love. The soft knock at the penthouse door came late. Maureen was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup when she heard it. She glanced at the clock, nearly 10 p.m. Joshua hadn't mentioned expecting anyone. She wiped her hands and walked toward the door, her bare feet silent against the marble. When she opened it, her breath caught. Zach Perry stood there, casual in a simple gray jacket and dark jeans, but his face was serious. "Hi," he said, his voice low. Maureen stepped back instinctively. "Zach, what are you doing here?" He shifted on his feet, hands in his pockets. "I needed to talk to you. Just for a minute." Maureen hesitated, the fresh memory of Joshua's kiss still a warm ghost on her lips. Zach's eyes softened. "Please." She stepped aside wordlessly. He entered the penthouse slowly, glancing around. The space felt even larger with the silence stretching between them. "I guess money really does buy happiness," Zach said, half smiling as he gestured at the grandeur. Maureen frowned. "Don't, Zach." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't come here to fight. I've been thinking about you. About us." "There is no us," Maureen said softly. Zach looked pained. "There could be. If you let it." Maureen shook her head. "I'm married." Zach stepped closer. "A marriage arranged by your family. You don't owe him anything, Maureen." She stared at him, feeling the old wounds stir, the ones from the girl who used to dream of choosing her love. Not having it chosen for her. "I don't feel trapped," Maureen said finally. "Not anymore." Zach blinked. "But you told me once, you wanted love. Real love." Maureen smiled, a sad little curve of her lips. "I have it." Zach stared at her, the truth slowly sinking in. "You love him," he said, almost whispering. Maureen didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Zach's shoulders slumped. "I was too late." Maureen stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You'll find your happiness too, Zach. But it's not with me." For a long moment, Zach didn't move. Then he nodded, offering a tight, sad smile. "Goodbye, Maureen." "Goodbye, Zach." She closed the door softly behind him and leaned her forehead against it for a moment, breathing deeply. When she turned around, she found Joshua standing at the edge of the hallway, shirt sleeves rolled up, arms crossed loosely over his chest. He must have heard everything. Maureen's heart stuttered. Joshua said nothing, just watched her. She walked toward him, her steps slow but sure. When she stopped in front of him, she tilted her head back to meet his gaze. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. Joshua's eyes flickered, something soft, something uncertain, before his mouth lifted in that rare, brief almost smile. "I wasn't worried." Maureen reached up, brushing her fingertips against his hand. Joshua caught her hand gently, lacing their fingers together. "You deserve more," he said, his voice rough. Maureen smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "I have more." And just like that, the old promises she had made to herself, promises of fairy tales and perfect loves, shattered, falling away like broken glass. What she had now was imperfect, quiet, real. And it was enough. It was everything. Maureen never liked attention. But when you marry Joshua Bassett, attention comes whether you want it or not. It started with a phone call from Maxwell while she was still in her pajamas, sipping morning tea. "Ma'am," Maxwell's polite voice came over the speaker, "Mr. Bassett has an event this evening. You're invited. It's time." Time. Maureen set down her tea, heart hammering. She knew what Maxwell meant. It was time for the world to meet Mrs. Bassett. The boutique was on a quiet street in Ikoyi, a world away from the chaos of Lagos traffic. Inside, it was a haven of soft lights, velvet sofas, and the quiet hum of classical music. Sophia Bush sat cross-legged on one of the sofas, tapping away at her phone when Maureen arrived. "You're late," Sophia said without looking up. Maureen smiled nervously. "I almost didn't come." Sophia finally looked up, smiling slyly. "You're here now. That's what matters." The dress was already waiting. Silk. Deep emerald green. The color of wealth, of understated elegance. The neckline modest, the tailoring sharp, the back open just enough to suggest without revealing. Maureen stared at it, doubt gnawing at her. Sophia stood, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're going to shut down Lagos tonight." Maureen gave a small laugh, shaky but real. "I'm not used to this." Sophia squeezed her shoulder. "You don't have to be used to it. You just have to be yourself." Later that evening, the Bassett car, glossy black, window tinted, slid to a halt in front of the event hall. Maureen sat frozen in the back seat, hands clasped in her lap. Joshua, beside her, was calm as ever in a dark tailored tuxedo. His watch gleamed against the cuff of his crisp white shirt. He glanced at her, his gaze steady. "You're nervous," he said simply. Maureen let out a shaky breath. Terrified. Joshua studied her for a moment. Then he reached out, his hand covering hers, warm, solid. "You don't have to be," he said quietly. "You're my wife. That's all they need to know." She looked at him, saw no mockery, no pressure, just quiet assurance. The driver opened the door. Flashes exploded the second Joshua stepped out. A storm of light and sound. Reporters shouted his name. Photographers jostled for position. Maureen hesitated. Joshua turned, offering his hand. Maureen took it. The flashbulbs went nuclear the moment she stepped out, the emerald green of her gown catching the light, the silk flowing around her like liquid. Joshua tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and leaned down slightly, his voice only for her. "Smile if you want," he murmured. "Don't if you don't." Maureen smiled. Not for the cameras. Not for the reporters. For herself. Inside, the hall was a sea of glittering dresses and sharp tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in soft gold. A stage at the far end boasted a banner, Bassett Group, Annual Gala. Joshua guided her through the crowd with easy grace, stopping to shake hands, exchange quiet words, all while keeping her close. Whispers followed them like perfume. "Is that her? She's stunning. I heard she's not even the one originally." Joshua squeezed her hand lightly. Maureen straightened her spine and smiled. They reached their table, and before Joshua could pull out her chair, someone intercepted them. Eric Ross. Tall, elegant, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Joshua," Eric said smoothly. "And this must be the new Mrs. Bassett." Maureen nodded politely. Eric's gaze sharpened as he studied her, lingering just a shade too long. Joshua's posture shifted subtly, protective, possessive. "My wife," Joshua said, voice low but firm. "Maureen." Eric offered a hand. "Pleasure." Maureen shook it, keeping her smile polite and distant. Eric leaned in slightly. "I must say, you're not what I expected." Maureen arched an eyebrow. "People rarely are." Eric chuckled and moved on, but the undercurrent remained. Joshua guided her to their table and sat down. "You handled that well," he said, a ghost of amusement in his voice. Maureen smiled faintly. "I'm learning from the best." Joshua's hand brushed hers under the table, a small, almost unconscious gesture. And just like that, the fear, the doubt, the noise, it all faded. She wasn't the girl who used to dream of fairy tales anymore. She was the woman standing in her own story, imperfect, complicated, real. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. The gala was a blur of lights, laughter, and polite conversation. But by the time Joshua and Maureen stepped into the car again, it felt like the world had gone quiet. Maureen leaned her head back against the seat, breathing in the cool night air filtering through the cracked window. She loosened her grip on Joshua's hand, but he didn't let go. He never rushed her. He never demanded more than she was willing to give. In the darkness of the car, Joshua turned slightly toward her. "You were amazing tonight," he said softly. Maureen smiled, small and real. "I was terrified." "And you still showed up," he said. "That matters." Maureen turned her head, studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his suit sat perfect and effortless on him, but his hand was warm and reassuring in hers. The car slowed, pulling up to the penthouse. They rode the elevator in silence, the tension between them no longer sharp but something heavier, thicker, like a storm waiting to break. In the apartment, Maureen kicked off her heels, the gown pooling around her ankles as she walked barefoot toward the balcony. Joshua followed her without a word. The Lagos skyline stretched before them, blinking gold and silver under the deep velvet sky. Maureen leaned on the railing, the cool metal grounding her. Joshua stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. "You didn't have to marry me," Maureen said suddenly. Joshua was silent for a long moment. "I know. You could have waited," she said. "For someone better. Someone you loved." Joshua chuckled, low and rough. "Better is subjective." Maureen turned to him, heart hammering. "You deserve love." "I have it," he said simply. Maureen blinked. Joshua turned to her fully now, his hand reaching out, not demanding, just offering. "I didn't marry you to save face," he said. "Or for the company. I married you because I saw someone I could build a life with. Someone real." Maureen swallowed hard. "I don't want perfect," Joshua continued. "I don't want someone who fits a checklist. I want you." Maureen's eyes burned, but she blinked back the tears. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. Joshua smiled, small and crooked. "You neither." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maureen's breath caught. Joshua flipped it open. Inside, a delicate gold ring gleamed, simple, elegant, timeless. No fanfare. No speech. Just Joshua, standing before her, offering her the world in the smallest, purest way. Maureen lifted her hand, and Joshua slid the ring onto her finger, right above the simple platinum band she already wore. A renewal. A promise, not of perfection, but of partnership. Joshua lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Stay," he said simply. Maureen smiled through the tears she couldn't hold back anymore. "Always," she whispered. Joshua leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. And under the endless Lagos night, with the stars winking above them and the city stretching endlessly below, Maureen finally, finally, let go of everything she used to want. And held on to everything she needed. The sun rose quietly over Lagos, casting golden light through the penthouse windows. Maureen stood in the kitchen barefoot, wearing one of Joshua's white shirts. It swallowed her frame, soft cotton brushing her knees as she poured 2 mugs of tea. She hadn't slept much, not because of worry, but peace. Real peace. Behind her, Joshua walked in, still in his pajama pants, hair tousled, eyes soft from sleep. He leaned against the counter, watching her. "That shirt looks better on you." Maureen smiled over her shoulder. "Everything does." Joshua chuckled, stepping forward to take the mug from her hands. Their fingers brushed, a touch that still lingered even now. They sat together at the breakfast bar in silence. Comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," Maureen said softly. Joshua raised a brow. "Dangerous." She rolled her eyes with a smile. "I want to do something with the Zanda Foundation. For women like my mother. Quiet ones. Forgotten ones. They need a way out." Joshua nodded slowly. "You should. I'll support you." "I don't want your money," she said, lifting her chin. "I want your advice. Your structure. I want to build this properly." Joshua's smile grew. "You already sound like a Bassett." Later that day. The media had calmed down since the gala, but Maureen still felt eyes on her when she entered the Grace Financial lobby. This time, though, she didn't shrink. Her walk was sure. Her tone, calm. And her wedding ring, both of them, shimmered under the lights. She headed into the boardroom where Sophia and Maxwell were already waiting. They stood when she entered, smiling with quiet pride. Maureen pulled a folder from her handbag and laid it on the table. "This is the proposal," she said. "The Zanda Initiative." Sophia opened it and raised a brow. "Women's legal aid. Financial literacy. Microgrants for single mothers." "It's ambitious," Maxwell noted. Maureen nodded. So was marrying Joshua Bassett. They laughed. But there was weight behind her words. Real history. Real growth. That evening. Back at the penthouse, Joshua returned from a meeting to find the dining room softly lit. Candles flickered. A simple meal was laid out, jollof, grilled fish, fresh pineapple slices. Maureen sat waiting in one of his oversized button-ups, barefoot again, smiling. "What's all this?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Dinner. Celebration." "For what?" "For choosing each other." Joshua crossed the room and kissed her, no hesitation, no fear. Just home. 6 months later, headlines read. CEO's wife launches Women's Foundation to fight silent abuse in Nigeria. And beneath the image of Maureen Zanda Bassett at a podium, holding hands with her mother and Sophia beside her, the city of Lagos watched a new kind of power rise. Not loud. Not ruthless. But soft, sharp, and unforgettable.